Welcome to the Virginia Department of Transportation's location public hearing to present its recommendation for a preferred alternative for the Martinsville Southern Connector Study, Route 220 Environmental Impact Statement. VDOT has developed this video to provide information and gather public comment on its recommendation for a preferred alternative. This presentation will first provide an overview of the study. Second, the goals of the hearing will be outlined, along with an overview of the study process. Then the purpose and need for the study and the alternatives that have been considered in the Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, will be described. Next, VDOT's recommendation for a preferred alternative will be explained. Finally, the next steps for the study will be reviewed. As prescribed by the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, an EIS is being prepared. The Martinsville Southern Connector Study EIS is being completed in accordance with Executive Order 13807, commonly referred to as One Federal Decision, or OFD. OFD sets schedule goals for obtaining a NEPA decision and related federal permits. To support the federal agencies in complying with OFD, VDOT is presenting its recommendation for a preferred alternative this summer so that it can be documented in a draft EIS that will be issued this December. The study process will result in a Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, record of decision and the issuance of permits from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, or the Corps of Engineers, and the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ. The Martinsville Southern Connector Study evaluates transportation improvements on U.S. Route 220 between the junction of U.S. Route 58, U.S. Route 220 Business, and the North Carolina state line. The study area is large enough to encompass potential improvements, but does not imply that impacts would occur within the entire study area. To recap the progress of the study process, the FHWA published a notice of intent to prepare an EIS in the Federal Register on February 22, 2018. A public scoping meeting was held on May 18, 2018 at Magna Vista High School to introduce the study and gather public comments on the issues within and surrounding the U.S. Route 220 corridor. An online survey conducted in fall 2018 asked participants questions about the U.S. Route 220 corridor, including which portion of the corridor do you typically travel, and what are your primary reasons for traveling on the U.S. Route 220 corridor. The survey also asked participants to give feedback on how to improve travel on this corridor. The comments received from the 775 responses helped shape the purpose and need for the study. The purpose and need sets the goal for the study that are met by different alignment options or alternatives. After the purpose and need was identified, 11 alignment options were developed and presented to the public at a citizen information meeting on January 23, 2019 at Drury Mason Elementary School. At the same time, another survey on these alignment options was conducted and 81 responses were received. The Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, were involved in all these steps and agreed with the purpose and need and alternatives to be retained. Agency agreement was informed by public input and monthly meetings with federal, state, regional, and local agencies. Following concurrence from the federal agencies, VDOT conducted analysis of engineering, traffic, impacts, and costs to refine the alignment options to a range of alternatives to be evaluated in greater detail in the EIS. The purpose and need documents existing transportation conditions and identifies the needs that the Martinsville Southern Connector Study aims to address. The following needs have been identified for the study. Accommodate regional traffic. Current inconsistencies in access, travel speeds, and corridor composition along Route 220 inhibits mobility and creates unsafe conditions considering the high volume of truck and personal vehicle traffic traveling through the corridor to origins and destinations north and south of the study area. Accommodate local traffic. Numerous uncontrolled access configurations along Route 220, combined with high through traffic movement, create traffic delays and contribute to high crash rates for travelers within the corridor accessing residencies, commercial buildings, and schools. Address geometric deficiencies and inconsistencies. Current geometric conditions along Route 220, such as lane widths, horizontal curves, and stopping sight distances, are below current design standards and vary along the length of the corridor, resulting in safety concerns for all users. VDOT FHWA, the Corps of Engineers, and the EPA agreed to the purpose and need on November 14, 2018. 11 alignment options were developed and evaluated to determine whether they met the purpose and need. This included Alignment Option 1, the no-build alternative which is required for NEPA studies like this EIS. Alignment Option 2, Transportation System Management, Travel Demand Management Improvements. Alignment Option 3, Reconstruct Existing U.S. Route 220. Alignment Options 4A through 4D, Western Alignment Options. Alignment Options 5A through 5D, Eastern Alignment Options. VDOT evaluated the alignment options using a 300-foot inventory corridor with potential interchanges represented by asterisks on this map. All alternatives assume a full access controlled facility with access connections at interchanges to document a worst-case scenario for impacts and costs. The interchanges along with each corridor are designed to preserve all existing movements. If and when a preferred alternative advances to more detailed design phases, final decisions could be made about the level of access control that would be applied to the facility and how interchanges would be configured. Transportation system management, travel demand management improvements are designed to maximize the efficiency of the existing transportation system through strategies such as coordinated traffic signal timing and promoting carpooling and staggered work shifts. This option was determined not to meet the needs for the study as a standalone option. However, it could be implemented in the future as part of a preferred alternative or a standalone projects. Traffic data developed for the study indicates that most northbound traffic along Route 220 traveling through the study area eventually travels in a northwesterly direction. Therefore, the eastern alignments were found to not meet the need to accommodate regional traffic. By not accommodating regional traffic, the need to accommodate local traffic would also not be met. As a result, the eastern alignment options were not retained for analysis or consideration as a preferred alternative. Other alignment options were refined based on public comment and engineering considerations. The western alignments, the western spur, and the option to reconstruct existing Route 220 were determined to meet the purpose and need of the study. After initial evaluation of the alignment options and public comment, the following alternatives were retained for study. Alignment Option 1, which is the no-build alternative and required by NEPA. Alignment Option 4A, which is now Alternative A. Alignment Option 4B, which is now Alternative B. Alignment Option 4C, which is now Alternative C. Alignment Option 4D, which is now Alternative D, and Alignment Option 3, which is now Alternative E. Once the alternatives were retained, VDOT was able to advance with greater consideration as to how each alternative could reasonably connect to existing roads. Therefore, alternatives A, B, and C were refined to swing to the east and then cross over existing Route 220 to follow west of the existing route. These are worst-case interchange scenarios that would be refined if the project advances to detailed design. Based on preliminary right-of-way information, the high number of estimated property impacts estimated for Alternative D and Alternative E made both infeasible to consider as a recommended preferred alternative. The preliminary data collected on these two alternatives will be documented in some of the reports associated with the study, but they are not under further consideration. The no-build alternative illustrates the existing conditions with all other current planned transportation improvements and serves as a baseline for comparison with the build alternatives. Alternative A starts at the existing U.S. Route 220 at the North Carolina state line, running to the east and then crossing over U.S. Route 220 and heading northwest to connect to U.S. Route 58 at a new interchange located 1 mile west of the existing Joseph Martin Highway interchange. Alternative B starts at the existing U.S. Route 220 at the North Carolina state line, running to the east and then crossing over U.S. Route 220 and heading northwest to connect to U.S. Route 58 at the existing Joseph Martin Highway interchange. Alternative C starts at the existing U.S. Route 220 at the North Carolina state line, running to the east and then crossing over U.S. Route 220 and heading northwest to connect to U.S. Route 58 at the existing Joseph Martin Highway interchange. VDOT collected data along a 400-foot wide corridor for each alternative. Estimated impacts and costs for each alternative are based on illustrative planning level designs, or limits of disturbance that would be refined if an alternative advances to detailed design. Through the study process, VDOT has evaluated the potential impacts within the limits of disturbance for the range of alternatives, including potential impacts to private property, wetlands, streams, and forests. VDOT's recommended preferred alternative is Alternative C. VDOT considered the extent to which each alternative meets the purpose and need while balancing cost and impacts. VDOT's recommendation is the alternative that it believes is permittable. The Corps of Engineers can only authorize the least environmentally damaging practicable alternative through its permits process, meaning the alternative must result in the least impact to aquatic resources while retaining feasibility. Therefore, the estimated wetland and stream impacts that are presented for each alternative play a key role in informing the identification of the preferred alternative. After this hearing, VDOT will finalize the study documentation and the FHWA will publish the draft EIS. Sign up on the study website at virginiadot.org/Martinsville Connector to receive notifications on the issuance of the draft EIS and future public hearings. Following the review of the draft EIS, VDOT and the FHWA will respond to substantive comments received from the public and the agencies involved in the study, refine any necessary analysis, and document these efforts in a final EIS. Following the issuance of the final EIS, VDOT will request a record of decision from the FHWA and permits from the Corps of Engineers and the DEQ. These documents will indicate the study phase is complete. VDOT wants to hear from you. Your feedback is critical to the success of the study and to the region's transportation future. Written comments regarding the content of this hearing will be accepted through August 25, 2019. A survey is available on the VDOT study website at virginiadot.org/Martinsville Connector. Be sure to visit the study website for periodic updates and to sign up for news on the study's progress. The draft EIS will be released in December 2019. An additional public comment period will begin at that time and will include another location public hearing in January 2020. All substantive comments received on VDOT's recommendation on the preferred alternative and on the draft EIS will be responded to in a final EIS, which will be released in late 2020. Thank you for joining the Martinsville Southern Connector Study public hearing. We appreciate your interest and participation in this important study.